Enough already. Always showing up in front of me with that face I absolutely despise. It can't do anything about that face. Sorry about that. It's not like I chose to be born like this. Yet every time you see me, you always complain. What? You're talking back now? You've become so cheeky lately. Just because you're 12 doesn't mean you can start rebelling against your parents. I was born blind in my right eye, which caused it to enlarge slightly, making my face look unbalanced. My mother was so appalled by my appearance when I was born that she considered abandoning me, but was scolded severely by her parents and reluctantly decided to raise me. She has complained about this to me many times. That's rich coming from you who raised me out of obligation and now pretends to be a parent. I've never once thought of you as my parent. My mother looked at me with eyes as if she was looking at something she despised without showing any emotion other than anger. It's so noisy first thing in the morning. What's with you guys? Let me sleep in on a day off, will you? You should say something to her too. You must dislike her face just as much, right? What? Of course, I dislike that disturbing face. It's your fault for giving birth to such a child, forcing us to take care of her. We should have gotten rid of her a long time ago. It doesn't matter what your parents said. I know. As soon as my father woke up, my mother started speaking harshly in front of me, casually mentioning getting rid of me and disturbing face. I knew that my father only saw me for my appearance and disliked me from the start. To me, they were just an unpleasant uncle and aunt who fed me. I see. So that's all you think of me. I wasn't sad. I knew they were that kind of people, so it didn't matter to me. Yes, a failed, worthless human like you. I have no recollection of giving birth to you. My mother suddenly said that and went to whisper something to my father. I couldn't hear what they were talking about, but I knew they were plotting something. What? If you have something to say, just say it clearly. Nothing. Anyway, we have errands to run this morning, so we'll be leaving soon. My parents started eating, then hurriedly prepared and left somewhere. They'd often left in the morning and came back at night, so I didn't think much of it at the time. But they didn't return that day, and 3 days a week. A month passed. I could bear it if it was just a week, since it happened once before, for but a month. Were we clearly abandoned? Confused, I decided to call my maternal grandparents, the only number I knew, to see if they had heard anything. Ah, hello, Grandpa. Ah, Anna, what's up? Why the sudden call? Have you heard anything from Mom? No, I haven't heard anything. I told my grandfather everything about the last month, the verbal abuse from my mother, the verbal abuse from my father, and the fact that I was raised out of obligation. Dorothy did that, and they haven't come back for a month. Are their belongings still there? Yes. What should I do? Come to our house. I'll come to pick you up in an hour. An hour later, my grandfather came to pick me up in his car, and I ended up living at my maternal grandparents' house. It seems Dorothy raised you reluctantly because we told her to properly raise her child. I can't help but think maybe we should have taken you in and raised you ourselves. I really put you through a lot of trouble. I'm sorry. I'm disappointed that Dorothy turned out to be that kind of person. It's not your fault. It's Mom. Mom's to blame because I'm blind in my right eye, and it's enlarged, making my appearance unpleasant. She despised me for that alone. The last thing she said, "I don't remember giving birth to something like you," was the only thing that really hurt me. I didn't think of her as a parent, but I was grateful she gave birth to me. Those words from my mother suddenly pierced my heart, and tears started to flow. Seeing this, my grandfather handed me a handkerchief and spoke to me in a gentle voice. Dorothy has always been like that, a person who judges others by their appearance and looks down on them. She's the one who doesn't understand anything. Just wait and see. You'll prove how capable you are in the future." 12 years later, I lived in my grandfather's house, learned various things, started a company, and became a CEO with an annual revenue of $150 million at a young age. Then, having heard rumors, my parents came to my company and bowed their heads to us, and that's when my parents' downfall began. My name is Anna, and I was born blind in my right eye, causing it to become enlarged. Raised by a mother who disliked my appearance until I was 12, I endured verbal abuse about my looks. My mother was straightforward and judged people by their appearance, unhesitatingly complaining about people she disliked right in front of them. "Really, can't you do something about that face of yours? I get sick every time I see it." I clearly remember being told such things when I was just 3 years old. As she touched my enlarged eye, she often tampered with my face and used my blindness to her advantage by placing obstacles at my feet to make me trip. A minor thing, but still a form of. Why can't you see that right in front of your feet? Be more careful. You're such a failure. As I grew older, the harassment escalated, and my father, who turned a blind eye, offered no help. When I sought help, I was shunned with, "Don't come near me because you're disgusting." There was no one in my family to stand by me. Mom talked about my eye again today. Am I not seen as a child? Every day I would talk to my dolls in my room and cry, shocked that my mother did not see me as her child and unsure what to do. But by the time I was 12, my affection for my parents had completely vanished, and I decided to resist rather than be mistreated any longer. Don't mess with me. You always call me disgusting and a failure, but aren't you the real failures for looking at your child that way? Such verbal exchanges became common with my mother. She fought back, but I didn't want to lose, so I resisted desperately. Around this time, my parents began to leave the house more frequently. "I'm going out," that was all she would say. So I had no idea where they were going. When I was younger, they would return after half a day or a day, but recently they would not come back until late at night, and sometimes they would be gone for a week. However, when my suffocating parents were not around, I felt relieved, and their absences worked in my favor. "Anna, do you want to study more?" My mother suddenly said this. I wanted to attend middle school and had plans to apply and take the entrance exams for the school of my choice, but she unilaterally canceled my application and prevented me from going to middle school. Why? What are you thinking? What are you talking about? You don't need middle school. Why do you think someone like you, a failure, can go to the same school as normal people? Get over yourself. Failure. Failure. You always belittle people like that. Why do you hate me so much? Why won't you let me do what I want? You're not human. You can't see with your right eye. It's larger than normal, making your appearance inferior to others. Being told by my mother that I was not human shocked me. My mother had never gone that far before, but facing me, she finally did. The words from my mother that pierced my heart the most. Why? Why do I have to be told such things? I'm alive and talking like a human. Saying I'm not human is just cruel. The phrase "not human" was too frustrating. I had resolved in my heart to refute everything I had been told and to out-argue my mother's reasoning, but those words broke my spirit. Leading me to seclude myself in my room and cry every day as she declared, my mother withdrew my middle school application and started to neglect me at home. "Your dad and I will be gone all day today," she would say and leave, leaving only a little food behind, which I had to prepare and eat myself. Though manageable for a day, the duration of their absences began to extend to 3 days a week. Where could they always be going? On a certain day, while harboring these doubts, my parents returned home carrying big bags. "We're home." I had never reacted so strongly before, but seeing them come in with gift shop bags and dressed like they had just come back from a trip, I was taken aback and couldn't help but exclaim out loud, "What's that? Where have you been?" "Oh, how unusual for you to ask such a thing. Do you want to know?" "No, not really." Irritated by my mother's unnaturally cheerful demeanor, I acted disinterested, though I was curious. But my mother started talking about it as if she wanted to, actually. "We went to Hawaii?" I thought so. They were wearing aloha shirts and had sunglasses on their heads. They must have had a good time. At that moment, I was certain my parents' frequent absences were due to them going on trips without me. They didn't want to show the world my shabby face, so they left me behind to avoid that. Whatever. Go do whatever you want, scum. My mother's gleeful tone irritated me, and I blurted out those words coldly. Perhaps angered by my response, my mother slapped me without a word. What's with that dull response? Mocking me? What do? You mean by that? What do you expect me to say to insensitive parents going overseas without their child? Don't mess with me. I glared fiercely at my mother and retreated to my room. I was appalled by my parents' despicable behavior and didn't even want to see their faces. Too upset to cry, I just curled up in the dark room, emptying my mind on the bed without thinking about anything. Maybe it would be better to just run away from this house than to live like this. That thought crossed my mind. But what could I do at the age of 12? Even if I ran away, my parents wouldn't come looking for me. But I realized I had no means to live on my own and ended up staying at home. The next morning felt different somehow. My mother was in a bad mood. Was she still upset about yesterday's incident? As I was about to go to the bathroom, I was greeted by the usual scolding from my mother. Enough already, always appearing in front of me with that face. I can't stand it. Can't you do something about that face? But her tone wasn't light as usual. It was heavier, adding weight to my feelings. What followed was an argument between me and my mother, and after whispering something meaningful to my father who had just woken up, they left the house. A few minutes later, never to return. After being absent from the house for a month, I was convinced I had been abandoned. Remembering my earlier thoughts of maybe I should just leave this house, I felt a bit teary. I was glad my parents were truly gone, but the overwhelming feeling of being completely alone brought on anxiety. I'm lonely. I'm starting to feel lonely now that I think I've really been abandoned. Mom, Dad. In the midst of feeling lonely, thoughts of my mother and father briefly crossed my mind. However, those feelings were quickly overshadowed as I thought of someone else, my maternal grandfather, who often took me to his home and where I had stayed many times as a child. It must have been because I lacked the ability to live on my own back then, so he would take me to his place not to leave me alone at home. Remembering my kind grandfather, I called the only number I knew of him and told him everything that had happened. Mom told me. She said I'm not human. She called me a failure and said she raised me out of obligation. Hearing my grandfather's voice after such a long time brought me relief, and as I poured out my heart, tears welled up uncontrollably, and I broke down crying on the phone. Come to our house. I'll come to pick you up right away. His kind voice over the phone comforted me, and I waited for him to come. That very day, I was taken to live with my grandfather. How are your grades, Anna? His sudden question puzzled me, and I asked back, why? In response, he handed me a pamphlet, the middle school brochure. Yes, Anna, you weren't allowed to go to middle school, were you? Why don't you give it a try? Midterm admissions are possible, and don't worry about the money. I'll take care of it. Go there and study hard. Don't you want to study? I love studying. I hated being with my parents so much that school became my sanctuary, and I had many friends. But now I can't see them anymore. Well, you can always make new friends. And about your eye, your parents did nothing about it, right? How about getting surgery? It won't bring back the light, but it might help with the imbalance. Really, would you do that for me? Of course, if it makes you healthier and happier. I'm willing to spend whatever it takes. Don't worry, I have plenty of savings. There's no point in saving it for my old age if I can use it for you now. I was overjoyed. My grandfather was willing to help me attend middle school and even get surgery to improve my condition, which did make my appearance somewhat better after getting a prosthetic eye. Starting anew, I enrolled in high school, and later my grandfather suggested something. You truly are my granddaughter. You've inherited the good traits. Inherited what? Not just your exceptional grades in math, but also your overall academic performance. With brains like yours, why not study business management? Business management? Yes, why not learn how to manage a company? Then you can give those foolish daughters a lesson. I was initially surprised by my grandfather's suggestion, but felt it was a chance to prove myself against my mother and her demeaning views. My grandfather occasionally checked on my estranged parents through his smartphone, allowing me to keep up with their whereabouts indirectly without revealing my presence at the family home. I had hoped your mother would learn business management and take over the company I managed, but she chose her own path, leaving home and only returning to drop you off. Such a disgraceful child. Grandpa, does that mean I'll take over the company? Well, the original company is gone, but a subsidiary survived. They've been looking for a successor, and it seems like a good opportunity for you. Your intelligence should serve you well in business management, so give it a try. Following my grandfather's advice, I enrolled in a business-focused high school, graduated, and learned more about being an entrepreneur. By the age of 20, I was put in charge of the subsidiary, and by 24, my business acumen had flourished, achieving an annual turnover of $150 million. Anna, you've done well. I never imagined you'd have such business talent. Even in my prime, I couldn't achieve a turnover of $150 million. I'm glad to have discovered your potential. No, it's all thanks to you, Grandpa. If you hadn't told me to come to your house, I couldn't have grown so much. Who knows what would have become of me otherwise? Imagining myself left behind in that old apartment made me shudder. While my grandfather and I were indulging in our nostalgic thoughts, his phone suddenly rang. Hello. Dad, I was hoping to talk to you about something. Is it okay if I come over this evening? A favor? What's all this about all of a sudden? Yeah, I think I mentioned it in a message before. It's about money. You never learn, do you? I've always tried to teach you to handle these things properly. You know this happens because you never listen. I'm really sorry. Sorry anyway. All right, come over. I'll listen to what you have to say. The caller was my mother, discussing money matters. My grandfather's face remained emotionless as he dealt with the conversation, exuding an attitude of looking down on her. Mom? Yes, it was Dorothy. She'll be coming over this evening. It's a perfect opportunity for a comeback, Anna. Make sure you're here. But I'm a bit scared. Don't worry, you're not 24 anymore. If it makes you feel better, bring your boyfriend. Having a strong man around might give us an advantage, especially since your father will be there too. It's just a precaution in case anything happens. My grandfather reassured me with a wink, lightening the mood. By then, I had a fiancé who worked with me as the vice president of our company, a young talent who had stayed with the subsidiary when I took over. He had always supported me, becoming my partner in both business and life. Fiancé, Chairman, this is so sudden. I've heard about it from Anna, but this might be too much for me. stopped calling me chairman. That was back when I was with the company. Now I'm just a retiree living a quiet life. You've been Anna's partner all this time, and you're strong. I can rely on you. Come on, it'll be fine. Convinced by my grandfather's forceful persuasion, my fiancé eventually agreed, even managing a laugh. Thank you. I'll see you this evening. I hadn't expected to reunite with my parents so suddenly. Despite my fears, I tried to calm my nerves, finishing up work before returning home with my fiancé as per my grandfather's instructions. For now, you two hide in the next room. I'll start the conversation when I hit the table. That's your cue to come out. Dad, it's been a while. Sorry for dropping by like this. I could hear my mother's high-pitched voice from the other room. Just hearing it made me freeze in fear for a moment. Are you okay? You look terrified. Do you think you can handle this? He comforted me as I trembled, rubbing my back to soothe my nerves. You mentioned something about needing money over the phone. What's going on? Actually, I've gotten into some debt, and I need a substantial amount to pay it off. I was hoping to borrow some money from you. I don't have money to lend to you. Whatever your situation, you're an adult. You need to take responsibility for your debts. What kind of adult at 50 still doesn't get that? Then why did you ask us to come here? You could have just said no over the phone. Let me ask you something. What about your child, huh? Child? What about Anna? I'm asking if you've properly raised her. You hardly ever contact us, never visit, and barely mention Anna. She should have gone through middle and high school by now. She should be working at her age, but we haven't heard a thing from you. What's the meaning of this? It all depends on the child, doesn't it? I did my part, made sure she went through middle and high school, and watched over her until she became an adult. I don't know which company she joined, but she must be enjoying herself, right? My mother's voice dropped the initial shrillness, giving way to a rougher tone. It sounded like the voice of someone hiding something. Pressing my ear against the sliding door, I started listening intently to the conversation between her and my grandfather. See, so who was the one who called this house 12 years ago, huh? Dorothy, where were you for an entire month 12 years ago? On a trip, leaving your child alone for a month? What were you doing? What? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I'm going to make you spill everything about Anna, about your financial situation, all the truth. My grandfather's shout was a signal for us. I slid the door open with force and appeared in front of my mother. Long time no see. Do you recognize me? Huh? Oh, you? Anna. Seeing me suddenly appear, both my mother and my silently sitting father were shocked, their eyes wide open. Why are you here? And how come your eyes? Is my eye not healed? I had surgery to remove it, and now I have a prosthetic eye. And as for why I'm here, you left me in that house 12 years ago. Grandpa told me to come here, and he took me in. I threw those words at her, driven by emotion. Honestly, I was scared. My body trembled, but I mustered all my courage to confront her with the truth. Wait, so. She raised her voice, glaring at my grandfather with a look of defeat,